what, every year, we get asked to do so many different things, and we've tried very hard to stay really focused. We've made over 175 visits now to shelters and rescues in 13 states. Every time we go in, we want to learn their story, we want to learn what they're doing, how they're solving their issues, and then we want to share it with people. And it started because I wrote a book about fostering. I fostered dogs for years and years, and I'm a writer, and I was a novelist, still am sort of. But I wrote a blog about it, because when you're a writer, you write about whatever was going on in your life, and I was fostering dogs. I was really only fostering looking for my dog, because I had a dog who lived to be almost 18, and when she passed, it was very hard to settle on any particular dog, to not replace her, but so I started fostering, thinking I'll just foster till I find the right dog, and that'll be that, and 300 whatever now later, it's continued. But I fostered like 100 dogs, and I've written a book about it called Another Good Dog, One Family and 50 Foster Dogs, and it's just about our first 50 dogs. And when I first went out to travel on a book tour, the publisher sent me south. So I was in Pennsylvania at the time, and now live in Virginia. And I thought, oh cool, I'll go to the shelters, it'll be so fun. 100 dogs in, right? I should know this by now, but I didn't. So I loaded up a van, I got so many donations, I had to rent this huge truck thing that was very scary to drive. And a best friend came with me and did book signings for a few days, and then we got to where the shelters were, and I was so stunned. It was a North Carolina shelter, it was Lenore County, and it's right there next to the swamp, and most of the dogs are housed outside. 80% of the dogs were heartworm positive. There's no air conditioning. It was such a shock to see the number of animals, the conditions they were living in. I remember I was talking with the volunteer rescue coordinator who was working there pretty much full time, and it said, how many dogs came in this month? And she said 50. It's not a huge shelter. To me at the time it felt like a huge shelter, but and I said, how many got adopted? And this was like the end of August, and she said 3. So that was such a wake-up call for me. I just thought, how could I be this deep into rescue, written a book about it, and have no idea what's happening in our shelters? And so that was where it started. I toured 13 more shelters on that tour. And then I brought Nancy with me because people don't read, sadly. But she's a talented photographer. They do look at pictures, and I just kept thinking, if people could see this. I mean, I was so up to my eyeballs in rescue, and I didn't know, so that made me feel like 90% of this country has no idea what's really happening in our shelters. So we set off to learn and to share, and it ultimately ended up being, this book came out in January. Who Will Let the Dogs Out? That's the name of our organization, but this book is called Who Will Let the Dogs Out? Stories and Solutions for Shelters and Rescues, and it kind of has all of what I've learned so far. And even since it's come out, there's things I'm like, oh, I wish I'd written this, I wish I'd written that, but you gotta stop at some point, you can't keep editing forever. And so we are giving it away free to shelters and rescues. We mailed, I'm sure we sent you guys something. We sent one copy. In fact, I was talking to the shelter director today, and he's reading it and asked questions about it. And more than that, we're trying to provide resources and ideas. So on our website, we have everything we've ever learned. That's a cool idea for fundraising or adoption events or fostering or whatever. Every grant we know of. We have a grants advisor who is a volunteer with us, who works with any shelter that we have visited to help them write grants and get grants. We have 2 grant programs of our own. We're really proud. We've grown enough now that ASPCA sponsored our first Insta grants, which are grants that we give to shelters we have visited of resources. We don't have a big complicated application process. We don't hand out checks. But if you need something and it's not in your budget, because municipal budgets are hard, if you want something, need something, you can't just get it. You probably know that. There's a lot of paperwork and asking and begging. So that we just do that. So we had one just this week. Shelter requested a freeze, like a box freezer, so that they could freeze Kongs. It's a huge shelter. They have 300 dogs at a time, and so they wanted their volunteers to be able to like freeze a freezer full of Kongs. But they're a municipal shelter. It was a $400 freezer. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but they can't ask for donations. They're municipal. To get them, it would be a year or whatever. They had to build it in the next budget. So they contacted our Instagram coordinator. Karen said, "Where is it? Which one do you want?" And bought it, shipped it. They got it already. So that's what I want to be able to do as part of our organization, is to to be able to give them those kind of resources. We just launched something similar called InstaSnip, and it's spay neuter money, but the way it's done, and I was explaining this to your shelter, is we give a certain amount of money, but we give it to your vet's office to set up a fund, an InstaSnip fund, and it's a seed grant of about $2,500 usually. And then we give the shelter tools, graphics and all those visual assets and stuff, to then invite the community to grow that grant, to add to it, so that they can donate directly to that fund, so 100% of the money goes to spaying neuter pets, shelter animals. And that way there's no, it's a workaround. Like the municipality never has to handle the money, the staff never has to ask for the money, the donors never have to worry how the money was spent. Did it end up in the county pot? Did it get used for this or that? It goes to the veterinarian's office, and it can only be used to spay and neuter shelter pets. And so that's our newest initiative we're very, very excited about. So that's some of what we do. I don't know what you guys want to talk about, but I can tell you a little. I can give you just the basis for, in the book I talk about. The book is sort of focused around the three things that I've realized after touring so many shelters and talking to so many animal control officers and shelter directors and volunteers and advocates and veterinarians and I don't know how many people in government offices too. There's three things that I know that a shelter has to have to succeed. And then when they've got these three solid pieces in place, it's a shelter I know we don't have to go back to visit because they're gonna figure it out and it's gonna work. And the first thing is leadership, and it's all comes down to that all the time. And the leadership, sometimes we've seen it, sometimes it's a director or the ACO, sometimes it's a volunteer that kind of leads the way, sometimes it's a government official. It's somebody committed to saving these animals and to developing their shelter into a community resource. That means serving all of the community. One of my major frustrations in the last couple of years, and if you guys follow the numbers, you see that there are more dogs dying each year for the last 3 years. And I'm telling you, it's gonna go up again in 25, and it went way up in 24. And the problem's growing worse and worse. So we kind of hit this point right before the pandemic. I feel like we were kind of cresting right then anyway, and then the pandemic was a little craziness. But what's happened is many shelters have been embracing programs like managed intake and community sheltering. Those are like the buzzwords. And those two things are driving the stray population, which is exploding everywhere. And managed intake initially was a great idea. It was so when someone comes to surrender your pet, you counsel them, you talk to them about how can we help you keep your pet, what do you need, blah, blah, blah. And you schedule that. It's sort of like a cooling off period of buying a gun. Like yes, we'll take your pet, but you need to give us a week or two to get a kennel ready, to have things so that it can come in. And that made sense. When we first started hearing managed intake, and I think I heard it in 2019, that made sense in that term. But what it's grown into is shelters just closing to owner surrenders, just saying you won't take them. Point blank, we're full, we won't take them. And they're all doing that because they want to keep their numbers looking good, because they want to be no-kill. So there's this, but it's just, it's kind of rewarding them for not helping the community and not helping people with their animals. And the animal, what happens to those animals, it's never a pretty thing, and a lot of them get dumped. And 80% of animals coming into shelters are not spayed or neutered. So the math right there tells you that's the reason that our stray population is exploding. It's the reason why every shelter we visit has puppies. In 2019, we rarely saw puppies in a shelter. And if we did, they were tagged for rescue, waiting for the rescue to come get them. And the rescues were fighting over the puppies. I mean, it was crazy. And now they're euthanizing puppies. They did in Memphis this last week. So they were doing that, it's just really changed. And it's frustrating to me because these answers, managed intake and community sheltering, are actually making the problem worse. Because that's not leadership committed to serving their whole community. If you're only going to help the dogs in your building and not the dogs outside your building, you are not serving your community. You're not a resource for your community. So leadership committed to saving the animals, first piece. Second piece is affordable veterinary access. And that's hard to find everywhere. I understand from talking to your staff today at the shelter that it's a struggle here too. There's a lot of wait time for appointments. There just aren't enough appointments. And so access is definitely a challenge here, but not as bad as a lot of places. You at least have some. And the prices can sound terrible, but I don't know. I'm not familiar because it sounds like there are multiple places that they use. And then the third thing is you guys, third piece, the most important piece is community engagement. You have to have community in your building, they have to be, because it's not the shelter's problem. It's not the staff's problem, it's not the staff to save the animals, it's the community all together. It's your animals, they belong to you as a community. So the community needs to be in the building. You need to have, shelters need to have hours that let them come in. There needs to be volunteers and foster programs and any dog thing happening, it should be at the shelter. Like, I believe there should be like training classes. My book has a million ideas because I'm always thinking about another reason why people should be at the shelter. The shelter in South Carolina that I love, I think it's one of the best in the country. It's municipal, open intake. They built a dog park. They got a grant, built this cool dog park. They were Anderson County Paws. So the dog park's shaped like a paw, so it has like this big circular center and circular, so there's no dogs getting trapped in corners. And then it has 4 little round ones, and that's for dogs that prefer to play with just their owner or just their one dog friend. So it's a cool setup, but it brings people to the shelter. They come there and they're like, oh, I'm here and I can donate or I can drop off some stuff or whatever. So it just gets people onto their campus, and she has a million ideas like that. So those 3 pieces, leadership, veterinary access, and community engagement. And the book kind of centers around those 3 things and how we find those 3 things. I'm a very solution-focused person. I know you guys have a history here. I've heard a little history here, but I'm not really interested in it. And I didn't ask any questions at the shelter about it. I think they were sort of bracing for us to, and I'm not interested in that. That's happened. That's over. If you're gonna fix your problem here, you gotta go forward. You gotta focus on, okay, now what? Okay, so let it happen, find it happened, let it go. Now what do we do, and how do we work together, and how do we make things better in Franklin County for your animals and for your people? And I saw a lot of good signs there, really did. It's a really nice building. It's small, but it's a really nice building, and there's a lot of potential there. It was definitely clean. They've got some great protocols for intake. Sounds like that's new, but it's working. In cleaning, they definitely are doing a better job with all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of good changes happening. We did meet your new person, Amber. She's phenomenal, very knowledgeable, very experienced, but man, her job is way more than one person can or should do, but I guess she's gonna try.
I think it's because they're using her for things. She was hired for the volunteer and the outreach, and as a recipient of the outreach, I'm not seeing a whole lot of the outreach, but I think it's not her fault necessarily.